Still, because of the lack of modern science or anything like it, it took Europe many, many, many years of trial and error to get that plague under control. When it comes to global warming, we don't have 300 years or 30 years or really even 3 years, in my opinion, to start to take action, because time is not on our side. We've got to start as soon as possible. But we are fortunate in the fight against global warming. Modern science and technology are on our side, both in understanding the problem and in finding solutions to it. I would say that the most significant factor holding us back now is simply the resistance of people who don't want to change. And while I understand that, like those who have preceded them, we all need to work together to bring about the change that will elevate and protect our civilization. Some, of course, are now saying that we need to hold off on the Climate Security Act or anything like it because we are slipping into a recession. And the last thing the economy needs is something that might stifle growth. Well, respectfully, that's wrong for two reasons. The first is this legislation covers a period from when it's adopted to 2050. Frankly, we're not sure what the shape of the economy will be at the end of this year, but we do know that the longer we delay dealing with this problem, the more expensive the solutions will become. Sir Nicholas Stern of the UK, former chairman of the World Bank, found that while the economic consequences of unchecked global warming could consume as much as 20% of the world's annual gross domestic product, an investment of just 1% of annual GDP by 2050 could reduce emissions significantly and head off the devastating and costly impacts of climate change. There was a separate study done by the Environmental Defense Fund that found that waiting just 2 years to start emissions reductions will double the rate at which we need to reduce emissions by 2020 if we are to ward off the most catastrophic consequences of global warming. But second, we know that the sooner we start investing in these technologies, the faster our economy is going to grow. And the longer we wait, the further we will fall behind the rest of the world. Britain gives us a hopeful example here. The UK has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions by 15% since 1990, during which time its economy grew by 40%. But interestingly, environmental industries in just the last 5 years created almost 400,000 new jobs. We all want that kind of economic growth to occur here. A study by the Apollo Alliance, in fact, found that investments in low carbon and green technologies could create 10 million new jobs over the life of this bill, 1.4 trillion in new gross domestic product, and save consumers and industry $280 billion in energy costs. I know that others say we can't do this until China and India are on board, or we're putting our economy at a competitive disadvantage. We've dealt with that specific concern about the competitive disadvantage in our Climate Security Act, but look, let's take it to a different plane. The U.S. Is the world's largest cause, certainly cumulatively, of the greenhouse gas problem. And as a result, we have a responsibility, dare I call it moral, but it's also self-protective and practical, to take the lead in solving this problem. On the other hand, China, India, and other developing nations then must follow our lead, and I believe they will if we're to avoid global warming's worst global effects over the long term. Besides, after having been on the leading edge of most every technological innovation in the last century, why would we Americans want to forfeit that lead in the next great global paradigm shift, namely to green energy? I want U.S. engineers developing advanced energy technologies. I want U.S. workers building them, and I want U.S. companies exporting and profiting from those exports. If we do not enact a strong market-based climate law in this country now, then it will be Europeans or Asians or Indian engineers, European, Asian, or Indian or Chinese workers and companies dominating the new world energy economy. We can and must create the new economy here in the United States. And I believe America's Climate Security Act is the framework around which we can do that. This is no more than any other piece of legislation I've been privileged to work on over the 20 years I've been privileged to be a senator, is not a perfect piece of legislation. But it is a very constructive and I think balanced way to deal with this critical problem. And we, Senator Warner and I and other members of the Environment Committee, are open to the kind of dialogue that we've had extensively up to this point, but want to continue to have as we move to the floor with stakeholders on all sides of this issue to see if we can get it even better than we think it is today. If I may wrap up by quoting from John Shakespeare's famous son in explaining where I think we are. As you will recall, he wrote, "What's past is prologue, but what's to come is in your and my discharge." It's in that spirit that I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to speak with you today, and knowing the important part that you play throughout the country in relevant matters, on behalf of Senator Warner and myself, I ask for your support of America's Climate Security Act. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
The senator has agreed to take a couple of questions. If you would please go to the microphone and be brief with your questions, please.
We will take succeeding questions in order of the height of the questioner. Descending order, right? No. This good man has testified before me. All right.
Senator, thank you very much for your remarks. You indicated that Senator Reid looked to bring legislation to the floor this spring.
Yes.
Assuming that occurs, particularly looking at the CD mentioned about EPA's advance notice and some of the complexities of the Clean Air Act, if you were a betting person, what would you say the likelihood of legislation getting through this term or next term?
Yeah. I think that we have a slightly better than, now I'll have to give you this preface. If my wife were here, she would say before I answered the question, he is by nature an optimist. So you take that as a preface, but I think the prospects are just a decimal point or two over 50-50 right now. And let me be brief but more specific. As we look at the 100 senators, based on previous voting records, statements they've made, if I may put it blunt, we can find only 20 who we would put in the category of hopeless. That is with regard to this particular bill, of course, I'm sure right. We think that there's about 45 that are just definitely going to vote with us. We feel that there's about 15 more that are in a heavy tilt in our direction if we can figure out one or two small things. For instance, there's great interest in nuclear energy. And it's a complicated subject matter, but we're looking for just the right words to bring on a group of people on that. So you got 15 leaning hard, and then you got 20 that are open-minded.